I really appreciate you all being here, so thank you, and it's a real honor to be here as well. Just to give you a bit of an introduction on me, my name is Tash Mitch, and I'm a creative, a life coach, and a writer as well. And I just wanted to give a bit of an explanation of the different components that make up what I do. The creative element, one of the reasons why I have that in my title is because I feel that we're all creators and we're all creating constantly, basically every day of our lives. And sometimes we need to put sort of a bit of attention into that fact because we can't not create. Everything that we're doing, we're creating in some way, shape or form. The life coaching element, basically there's three elements to the life coaching element that I do. The first one is removing mental blocks. So sometimes we have a thought of going in a particular direction or something that we want to achieve in our lives or grow or expand. And sometimes there's thoughts that can get in the way of that. And for me, it's basically then working with people to release any limiting beliefs and release any limiting thoughts that they might have surrounding where it is that they want to go. The other part is basically about empowering people and basically just bringing to their mind, the front of their mind, their full potential and what they're capable of and, you know, what they can actually, what's available for them and what they can actually go towards. And the final thing is basically to act as a dedicated support system for people. So one of the things that it's been discovered is that when people have support there, when they're heading for something that they're doing in their lives that they want to expand or they want to make a success of, if they have someone who's actually dedicated completely to their success and completely to their empowerment, it makes the process a lot easier and it keeps them on track and keeps them in line. And then the third thing that I do is I'm a writer, and I've got some books at the back there if you want to interact with those a bit later on. The book that I've bought today is Artists of Health. So it's a series of 42 conversations with people in natural health about why they got into what they do and what they see the healing process being. So we'll just get started with this now. The talk itself, one of the reasons when I was actually interacting with Wesley to organize the talk in the beginning, there's two factors to it. There's the work-life balance that sometimes people struggle a little bit with, and there's also the mindful element of it as well. And one of the things that I thought would be really useful to do is to bring in the human needs as well, because there's 6 fundamental human needs that we all have, and we're all meeting in certain ways, but sometimes these needs are met subconsciously, and actually bringing it into the conscious mind and bringing it into our everyday existence so it's something that we're reaching for can be really useful. So the first thing to say is that basically, as human beings, we're made up of 724 trillion cells. So there's 724 trillion cells in each of our bodies. As well, we're having around about 60,000 thoughts in every day, 60 to 70,000 thoughts in every day. So there's no wonder that we try and narrow things down and we try and make things really simple and try and sort of create a life that, you know, we can actually start to hone in on particular areas and make differences in particular areas. But sometimes in that honing in process, we do ourselves a bit of a disservice because basically we actually forget about the fact that we're multidimensional, you know, we forget about the fact that there's quite a lot available within us that we can still tap into. And so this is one of the things that a talk like this brings to the front of the mind, basically. It kind of opens the mind out. And just, I'm not going to be telling you anything that you don't already know, which is one of the things. So what I'm actually going to be doing more or less this morning is just reminding you of what you already know. So one of the analogies I always put together for when we're looking at life balance is if you imagine a circus master who has a series of plates. They've got 5 plates, and he's actually spinning these plates on a stick, and he's got them in front of him. In order to keep those plates spinning, he actually has to keep a periphery view of everything that's going on and keep an awareness of when a plate might be tittering and it needs his attention in order to get the plate spinning again. And very much when we talk about life balance, this is an element for us, actually, that we need to have a periphery view of what our life entails holistically, but also there's times when we need to hone in and get things, get the energy moving in a particular direction. And so the question then becomes, how do we make ourselves that person, that circus master who actually has mastered the ability to have the periphery view and mastered the ability to actually hone in? And two of the things that I've actually worked with and have been huge influences for me in my work are Buddhism and Taoism. And with Buddhism, it's basically, that's where the mindfulness element comes in. And if you want to know more about Buddhism, if you look up the work of John Kabat-Zinn, he's basically the person who's actually condensed Buddhism into a form that can be easily digested by Western minds, more or less. But Buddhism basically is really about centering ourselves in a present moment. So we're not too far ahead, and we're not sort of, sending our energy so far ahead that we're not paying attention to what's going on right now. Neither are we so far caught up in the past that our present moment is not existing for us anymore. So it's actually just bringing our sense of attention to this moment right now. And that's where we're most effective, because we're always creating in this moment. This moment is where all our creations happen. It doesn't happen in the future, and it doesn't happen in the past. So that's where the mindfulness comes in. The Taoism comes in from the point of view, Taoism is really about where does life flow and where is life flowing to. And if you take your attention back to the plates, you have to have that level of mindfulness where you're in your present moment and there's a soft periphery view so you can actually see all the elements of your life. But in order to actually see where the plates are tittering, there's a question that needs to be asked is, where does my life need to flow? Where does my energy need to flow in this moment in order to keep all of this working? We have to have the attention of what all this is to begin with, but the tittering of the plates is basically you're standing in your mindful moment and you are asking yourself the question, where does my energy need to flow? And you will need to sometimes hone in on a particular area to focus your energy in a particular way, but then it's to come back and, come back to that periphery view. And that's really where the work-life balance comes in. So we're going to go through the components of the plate, really. So what actually makes up that part that we're constantly juggling? And for me, I tend to work with people in 5 particular areas and really draw their attention to 5 different areas that they need to keep a periphery view of at all times, because it's those areas that make their life tick. The first one, I'll just go through them to begin with. The first one is wellness and well-being. The second one is money and lifestyle. Wellness and well-being is one of those that it's the crux of everything else. Because basically, once we're feeling well, once we're operating well, once we're kind of in that zone where everything is okay with us physically, we're able to tackle whatever comes ahead a lot easier. And so I've actually put that as a highlight to expand on a bit more. Then we've got money and lifestyle, relationship and community, creativity and mental expansion, and soul and spirituality. The money and the lifestyle thing aspect is basically, what are your aspirations? What are your dreams? What is it that you reach for in your life, very much on a physical level? And that really then determines how much money you need to satisfy those needs. The thing with us as human beings, the human body and what we actually need to survive and to be happy within ourselves is very little. We don't actually need quite a lot. And sometimes when people get to the point where they've stripped everything back to what they fundamentally actually need, it kind of gives them a sense of relaxation, because they realize that if certain things were released in their life, they can still go on. So that's an element that we always have to kind of keep a mindfulness to. But then there's the opening out, and what do we need to thrive? What do we feel we need to feel successful in our lives? There's a couple of people just coming through now, actually. And that's normally very different for everyone, basically. The thriving element is very different for everyone. But money and lifestyle is definitely one of our plates. Another plate that we have is our relationship in our community. That's a really important one because none of us are an island on our own. And so, family, friends, work colleagues, business interactions that we might be having, all of these actually are really, really important. And as human beings, it's something where it's hardwired into our DNA to want to communicate with people and to want to be understood and to want to make a difference in other people's lives. And we feel actually really fundamentally fulfilled when that's going on. The fourth one is creativity and mental expansion. And this one sometimes could get dropped to the wayside when things actually are getting quite busy in our lives. But putting attention into our own personal development, putting attention into actually what we need to grow as human beings and what resonates with us in our growth experience is really quite useful because, again, these points are really about also what makes us feel fulfilled and what fundamentally makes us feel happy in ourselves as being, and in our lives. And definitely the creativity, the mental expansion, the growth element is a huge part of that. And finally, the soul and spirituality element. And that really is that sort of feeling that we're interconnected and we're connected to everyone and everything. And there's a purpose in our life in the middle of all of that. There's a sort of groundedness that makes us feel that there's a bigger picture involved in everything that goes on. And we are part of that bigger picture, and we're honed into that bigger picture as well. And to a large extent, when people have some level of soul and spirituality within their juggling elements, it gives their life a sense of purpose and it gives their life a sense of interconnectedness, basically. So the one that I'm going to expand upon, because the one that's kind of like the foundation really of everything, is the wellness element. And like I was saying, the wellness is basically once we are feeling good within ourselves, and that will be different for everyone, and that basically entails different things for everyone. But once we're actually physically feeling well within ourselves, what we're able to tackle is a lot more in terms of our lives. And there's 4 things that I always bring people's attention to in terms of the wellness element. Breath is a big one, because breathing is something that comes so naturally to us. The body almost breathes itself. Like, we don't tend to think about what our breathing is doing right now. But one of the things that I wanted to demonstrate with you is how important breath can be and how breath can actually change our biochemistry in just an instant. So if you just get relaxed within yourself and just sort of stand in a way that you feel relaxed, I'm going to do 2 different types of breathing with you. The first breathing is a really slow breath, and so we're going to breathe in for a slow count of 4, pause, and breathe out for a slow count of 4. And then the second breath is more of a power breath, and that kind of gets everything shifting and gets everything moving. So the first breath, if you just breathe in how you would breathe in normally, and breathe out. Okay, so I'm going to count you in with this one. So breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause, and breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause and breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause, breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pause and breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. What does that feel like? How does it feel?
Like I'm getting an oxygen high.
Like you're?
Getting an oxygen high.
Yeah. One of the things that it does is I don't know if you're feeling this, but it relaxes the shoulders. It makes your head, your neck relax. It empties the head a little bit. It relaxes the body. Once that's going on, your biochemistry is changing because basically your body is sending out hormones to say, we're in a good place here, everything's going to be okay. And bringing the attention to the breath in this way can be really, really useful, especially when things are getting really chaotic and life is kind of like speeding up. The way to slow it down sometimes, and we can do this even in a moment with people, is just taking some time, bringing the attention to the breath and just slowing it down. So the second way of breathing is the power breath, is what I call kind of like if you wanted to kind of get things shaking up and get things moving, this is a really good breath to do. So I'm just going to demonstrate this one. Also, with these breaths, basically, it's breathing from the diaphragm. So the stomach goes out when we breathe in. We expand the lungs. We actually open out to the lungs to their full capacity. And the stomach goes back in when we breathe out. We empty the lungs. And we basically, so with this power breath, just put some attention to the diaphragm as well. But it's... So if you try that with me. What does that feel like? Yeah? Do you feel the energy rising? Yeah? So that's actually a really good one. Sometimes when we haven't got the space to move and the space to kind of like get the body moving, sometimes actually doing the power breath to get the energy shifting is really quite useful. So that's the breath. The next thing is water. And when we're born, we're around about 78% water. But as we sort of become adults, the body reduces its water content to around about 65%. But the body actually really needs water to function. It needs water for blood to flow. It needs water for nutrients to flow throughout the body. The brain needs water in terms of minerals and etc. And also to eliminate, basically our lymphatic system needs water in order for elimination to happen. So water is a really huge one. And the thing with water is that basically we can go the whole day and not really touch water once. So we can drink loads of things and not touch water. But the purity of water helps the body immensely to flush the system out. And normally we need around about 2 liters on average every day, each human being. So that's something definitely to put attention to. The third one is nourishment. And again, with nourishment is one of those things where in our current society, a lot goes on with food where it's more for aesthetics and it's more for taste, but not always attention is put into the nutritional value and the nutrients that you're going to be getting out of that. And I always kind of advise for people to get in touch with someone who's a nutritionist to guide that process for them in the beginning stages if it's something that they're not familiar with. But the body needs nourishment. The body needs that sort of element where we're giving and feeding it things that it can actually rebuild itself, rejuvenate itself. The muscles need to rebuild at times. The organs are constantly changing and need rebuilding. And so actually putting attention to the minerals, to the nutrients that we're putting into our body and how we're nourishing ourselves, really vastly important. So that's one of the ones. And then the final one is movement. And movement, I've got a favorite one, which is yoga. I absolutely love yoga. And so I always direct people into that direction, because yoga is one of those things where it takes the body into almost that childlike thing. Have you ever noticed, like with children, when they're playing, or actually, their mothers and fathers could be sort of caught up in something and leave the child to their own devices. And they're rolling on the floor and they're stretching up in different ways and they're using their bodies in so many different ways. But as we actually get older and, we actually start to hone in on particular ways that we use our bodies, to the point where we can go for 6 hours sitting at a computer and not use our bodies and take the body through its full range of movement. So getting something in that actually hones in on that basically takes the body through its full range, is really good. Yoga is something I recommend to people because it's the idea of yoga, the philosophy of yoga, everything about it is honing in on taking the body through its full range of movement. But it's basically finding that thing that resonates most for you. And whatever it is, the stretching element is always quite important, because, the kind of like being able to reach up and reach back and sort of all of that kind of thing is really important. And when we're not utilizing all of that, we find that we go to reach up and something's aching or something's stuck. So paying attention is really important. So that's the wellness element. And the other needs, the other aspects of the plate, I'll actually cater for in the 6 fundamental needs that we'll go through at the moment. The 6 fundamental needs, or the 6 human needs that we have, are actually the art of fulfillment. And when we're looking after these needs, we're basically looking after what do we need to feel fulfilled as a human being? What do we need to feel fulfilled in our lives? What do we need to connect to and think of? So that's what we're going to be going through now. How is this for everyone? Are you getting value from it? Yeah? Good. Okay. So the 6 fundamental needs I'll go through to begin with. They are the needs for certainty, the need for variety, the need for significance, the need for love and connection, the need for growth, and the need for contribution. Those are the 6 fundamental needs that we have. And I'll go through them in a series of storytelling, just to basically give you an idea as to how these needs actually operate in our everyday lives. So, for example, if you think of the need for certainty, if we were all on the Titanic at the moment and the Titanic was sinking, would you be able to stand here and listen to me in the manner that you're doing at the moment? And I think the answer would probably be no, right? Basically, your attention would be over troubleshooting in all these different areas as to, what needs to be done for your own physical survival. And that's where the need for certainty comes in. The need for certainty, as human beings, we need to feel like, okay, everything is kind of in a way that I feel, I can deal with life as it is at the moment. I know, what's going to be happening. There's a kind of rhythm that's happening, and I'm comfortable with this rhythm. We need that, because that basically gives us that sense of balance, and it gives us that sense of what you call homeostasis, that sense of alignment. But sometimes, and I'll bring your attention to a friend of mine who came over from Denmark, basically. So her dad was Danish, her mum was English, and she spent all of her life, did university, etc. in Denmark, and then decided that she wanted to come and live in the UK. And she'd learned English and basically studied, etc. And what she was going to come over and do was to make a life in the UK. And in doing so, she arrived at the UK, basically set up everything, got her community together, kind of started to make friends. But there's always an element of vulnerability with being here, because it's kind of like everything that she knew was still in Denmark. And there was that kind of thing of like, well, what if something was to happen, if something really chaotic was to happen? How? So for her, certainty meant having a nest egg in her bank account of 45,000. And she told herself 45,000 because when she looked at her life and, if something really went skew if, what would she need to make all the components work? That's what she told herself. And that 45,000 just allowed her to sink into life a little bit and to relax into it. Another person's need for certainty could be completely different. They could tell themselves that they've got everything within them that they need for the certainty, and that's not what the factor is for them, but that's what it was for her. The need for certainty, though, can actually lead to that kind of sort of comfortability element where we get so comfortable with our lives, we know what's going to be happening tomorrow, because what happens tomorrow is what happened yesterday and is what's going to happen in the future. That gives us a sense of kind of listlessness. We get to that point where we start to get really bored. It's kind of like, what's next? And that's where the need for variety comes in, basically. We need to feel like there's, we don't know what's coming next, that we're challenging ourselves in ways that there's adventure, we're opening ourselves up to different elements of ourselves. Basically, we're opening our minds up to discover more of who we are. And the story that I've got for this one is John and Carol. Has anybody been to Machu Picchu? Yeah, right. So did you do the Inca Trail? Okay, brilliant. So basically, we went to Machu Picchu around about 3 years ago, and we flew out there and met a group of people to do the Inca Trail. In our group of people, there were a husband and wife called John and Carol, and John was 75, Carol was 72. And the thing with that was kind of like, we all knew the Inca Trail was going to be quite grueling in places and quite challenging in places. So at the beginning of it, we were like looking at them going, oh my God, can they make it, And that's the Inca Trail as well. We were camping out and all of that. So, it was we were in the elements and we were kind of like a lot of physical activity. And John and Carol were with us the whole time. They were there the whole time. And they became termed the legends of the camp because everybody would be dragging themselves back to camp at the end of the day. You'd be walking up mountains like this high that you can't see the end of, and then there'll be a camp somewhere that's kind of like, finally you can rest. And they were with us the whole way. And the one thing that I actually started to recognize with them is that everyone was taking in a lot of what was going on because it's so beautiful, isn't it, the whole Inca Trail, and so amazing, the parts that you have to pull out of yourself to get up those mountains. But with them, there was an additional twinkle in their eye because we were all calling them legends. We're like, oh my God, when I'm 75, I want to be exactly like you. And that's something that we need to experience within ourselves. And it doesn't necessarily need to be as, challenging or as out there as climbing, up to get to Machu Picchu. But we need to challenge ourselves in ways that we're bringing that variety out. We're bringing that sense of adventure out. We're opening ourselves and seeing something that we've never seen before. And that's something that bringing our attention to is really useful. So that's a variety. The next one is the need for significance. And we all have that need that we basically want to feel like, we're individuals, that we're a person in our own right and we're recognized as being a person in our own right. And each and every person, no matter how shy they might be, no matter how much they kind of, sometimes want to shut the world out a little bit, everybody has that need, and some people will get it from things like pets. We will always satisfy that need for significance. Some people will get it from things like fashion, from basically, having an identity through their clothing or whatever. But always the external way of getting that is really quite superficial. It's really quite sort of the polish. And the deeper need that we're always looking at is that need of purpose, that need of, feeling like our life is purposeful, we're making a difference in our lives. And one of the people that I'd like to bring up with this one, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Marie Forleo. Yeah? So Marie Forleo basically is a woman who has found out how the cogs of the online entrepreneur space works, and basically has built a business online in terms of reaching globally people with her online business. And once she actually found all of that out, she set up a business where basically she helps other women who are entrepreneurs to do that for themselves, to basically get a grasp of the online space, to actually operate in a way that they're operating globally, and to take out their business to the world in a way that feels aligned to them and feels aligned to their own integrity. But one of the questions that she's always asking of herself is, how can I be the best in the world at what I do? And how can I give the best of myself to the world? And I think when we're actually looking at significance, from that level, it takes the whole ball game into a whole different realm, because our minds start to open out to think about what we're resonating with, what are we connecting to, what makes us fires us up and makes us feel alive about our lives. And that's where the significance element comes in with that one, basically. So the fourth one is our need for love and connection. And we need both. Sometimes we can have love in our lives, but there isn't connection, and things like social media has actually brought that right to the forefront. Because people can have, and that's the other way, people can have loads of connections and not feel that love. So basically we need the both of them in order to feel that level of fulfillment, basically. And when I think of love, I mean, everybody has different ways of looking at love, and love is such an integral part to the human psyche, which is one of the reasons why there's so many songs and poems, movies about love. But one of the ways that I've found that connects with me to define love is actually standing in front of a person or a group of people and being completely emotionally vulnerable, completely emotionally open, where you're saying, this is who I am. And it's both the good and the bad. You're not hiding any part of yourself. You're basically just, this is who I am. And for you to feel from that other person complete acceptance, that they have accepted you exactly as you are, and they love you for that. That is, for me, when I think of love, that's basically what I think of and I feel. The connection element is a whole different thing, because we can actually feel that level of love from people and not feel connected to them. And for me, the connection of love really is the expression of love. It's sort of looking at someone and saying, I love you, or, that sort of sense of intimacy where you allow them into your personal space and you get close to them, that kind of thing. So having both as human beings is really fulfilling. And I'll give you a story for this one, which is a story of my friend Alex, who basically, he had a relationship with his father where he knew his father loved him. His father was always making sure that his life and his life components were ticking, so kind of like making sure that he got the right education, that he was going down the right route, that financially everything was going to be okay for him to begin with, and everything had been set up, and all of that kind of thing. So the physical components, his father was really on point with. But his father actually never really said, I love you. And his father never really there was no intimacy in that relationship. So there's always a gap. And there's always that kind of sense of awkwardness with it as well, that kind of like wanting to bridge that gap, but never quite getting there. And in the end, they never actually bridged that gap. His father passed. But when his father passed, he had to go through all his father's, personal effects and everything like that, and had to go up into the loft and clear that out. And in the midst of all of that, he discovered more about his father than his father had ever shared with him. And he discovered more about the man, and that led him to feel that level of connection that he never felt when his father was alive. And then he went on to have a son himself. And for him, it became of major importance to bring these two elements together, to bring that level of love where you're protecting someone, where you're taking care of them, where physically you're looking after their needs. But the level of connection where that person really feels and understands, there's no doubt in their mind, because you've said, I love you. You've demonstrated in so many different ways that connection that you've got with them. So that's where the need of love and connection comes in. And then we've got the need for growth. And I actually touched upon that point previously with the need for variety. But the need for growth is that level where we're challenging the brain in different ways. We're challenging the mind to operate in different ways. And one of the things that I always bring people's attention to is, for example, riding a bike. I don't know if everyone has learned to ride a bike at one point in their lives or another, but if you were to try to learn to ride a bike as an adult, there's so many different components that come into play to riding the bike. So you've basically got to get the balance right. You've got to know how the bike is operating. You've got to get your coordination right. You've got to actually get your direction, your sense of direction right. You've got to get the periphery right. You need to make sure that, there's safety going on. And all of these elements are firing off things in the brain. And the brain is making different connections each time. As we grow older, generally speaking, what we try and do is we try to get ourselves into that sense of certainty. So we try and get ourselves into a way that we know how everything's operating. And part of knowing how things are operating is to kind of like get a grasp of the world, get a grasp of our world. And we don't tend to always challenge ourselves in ways. And also, as we get older, we become more and more fearful of looking stupid and making mistakes. That's sort of fundamental fears of a lot of people. But the growth process is about making mistakes, because every time you make a mistake, every time you fall off the bike, or every time you titter, or every time you kind of like have to right yourself, you're firing off something else in the brain that's making a different connection and connecting that. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you're riding the bike and you're not even thinking about it. And it's the same for like driving a car, for example. And then there's something else that you can do that basically allows you to kind of get that, experience that level of challenge with the mind. But bringing that in is really important. And one of the things that, the mind element, the mind diseases that we're having in our current society, where things like Alzheimer's and dementia and things like that, one of the things that they're pointing to, there are a number of areas and components, but one of the areas that they're pointing to is exactly that certainty and comfortability that people get themselves into means that they're no longer challenging themselves, and they're no longer opening their mind to learning and to growth and to firing off the brain and to making new connections within the mind. And when that happens, certain areas of the mind shut down, and we sort of create this groove of comfortability that we're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So really, really useful, that one, the need for growth. And then the final one is the need for contribution. The last two needs, the need for growth and the need for contribution, are basically the driver needs that we have. They are the needs that will actually make us feel fulfilled, make us feel fundamentally that our life has purpose, regardless, because they will filter up, and I'll show you in a minute, they'll filter up and influence all the other needs. But those are the crux, the growth and the contribution. And the contribution element is basically that element where we're feeling like we're changing somebody else's life. We're feeling like we're making a change in the world. We're feeling like because we exist, somebody, something, the world is better because of it. That satisfies something in our core that is necessary, you know, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, it's there as a need. It basically, it makes us feel that there's a level of purpose to what we're doing, and we could find that in a number of ways. It could be community, it could be, you know, mothers find it through children to a large degree. We can find it in different ways, but we fundamentally have to meet that need for contribution in some way. Otherwise, there's a sense of dissatisfaction that comes in. And one of the people that I admire really greatly who does that is Oprah Winfrey, and she does that on a grand scale. Oprah Winfrey, to a large extent, you know, got quite successful in terms of the talk shows that she was having. And she actually, you know, made quite a lot of money doing that, and could have actually retired and have a fantastic life just doing that. But she decided to set up OWN, which is her own personal network. And she gets thought leaders, she gets people in the realm of spirituality, she gets people who are opening the minds of other people and expanding people's, you know, headspace. Personal development, human expansion. That's basically what OWN is about. And when it first started off, it was hard work because basically, you know, she wasn't bringing in the, you know, the numbers, etc., and making the financial element of it work wasn't easy. And I remember looking at her doing all of this, thinking, but you could have such a relaxed life right now, and you're not. You know, you've delved into this, and this is what you're doing. But now she's got the cogs of that wheel working really well. And the level of satisfaction that comes out of that from her, you could see it in basically her aura, let's say. Her program goes out to prisons, it goes out to hospitals, it goes out to places where people feel that there isn't any hope. And her whole thing is collaborating with people for human expansion. And for us, it doesn't necessarily need to be on a humongous grand scale like that, but generally having that element in there where we're paying attention to that, and that's a part of our lives that, you know, is ticking for us, really makes, you know, it makes a lot of sense, basically. So those are the 6 fundamental needs. And when you actually think of it, when I said, you know, the need for growth and the need for contribution were the crux, they're the driving forces. If you think about the need for growth and the need for contribution, if you're actually expanding within yourself, you're growing as a human being, you're doing things that you're resonating with, and, you know, creating that firing off in the brain thing, that you're feeling that satisfaction because you're getting better at things that you're trying, and you're contributing, so you're giving back to other people. Naturally, what will come out of that is love and connection, because once you're actually giving back to people and once you're actually satisfying that need for yourself, you will start to connect with other people in a lot of ways, and the expression of love and the expression of connection will be there. You'll get that sense of significance because of the fact that you're growing, because of the fact that you're learning more, because of the fact that you're challenging yourself. You get the sense of variety because once you've actually learned something and it's become second nature to you, you're going to actually start to think, well, what next? You know, what can I challenge myself with next? And you're going to get that sense of certainty, because a sense of certainty really is that sense of knowing internally, I have got the resources to meet this. You know, I've got the resources that no matter whatever life throws at me, I can do this, you know? And you can drop into that without, regardless of what's physically going on. And I remember someone saying one time that it didn't matter whether they lost everything. They basically had done so much within their lives and actually got their resources to such a level of robustness that they knew they could build it back up. And that's basically what that gives you, that level of certainty. So I really hope that you've got value out of this morning, and I hope it's been useful for you to come out, and thank you so much for being here.